Welcome to the Coming Clean podcast, the truth about cleaning. I'm your host, Alan Randolph, and this is episode 4, Cleaning Validation with Science. I'm super excited today because cleaning science is a passion of mine. 12 years ago, I developed a process called the Clean Audit to help measure cleaning outcomes using science. I've learned a lot about cleaning, what works and what doesn't in the past 12 years using the data I've collected. So I'm thrilled today to have a leading cleaning science expert as my guest. He graduated from the University of Dayton with both bachelor's and master's degrees in mechanical engineering. He's a clinical faculty member with the Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering Department at the University of Miami in Oxford, Ohio. He's an active engineering consultant to the cleaning industry and a member of the SERI Science Advisory Council, John Richter. Thanks for being on, John.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Well, as we talk about cleaning validation, I think in this time, particularly in a pandemic, cleaning has been heightened. So as a subject matter expert, let's kind of start maybe at the beginning, and maybe you can explain for the audience, because ATP gets talked about a lot in cleaning science. What is ATP? How does it work? And what does it measure?
That's a good question. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. That's what ATP stands for, adenosine triphosphate. Basically, in layman's terms, it's the energy molecule that's found in every living cell. Okay, so every cell, whether it be a plant cell, a human organism cell, whether it be a bacteria, you know what I mean? And viruses exist within cells, right? So anything that has any kind of cellular structure to it is going to contain ATP. So basically when we're talking about ATP and we're taking ATP measurements, we're measuring the biocontaminant load, if you will, on a given surface that we're trying to clean.
Yeah, so because I've done a lot of it and people get confused, it's been called a germ meter, and people are trying to validate the killing process in disinfecting. And I always tell people it's really very specific cleaning validation, right? It's just about measuring before and after and the impact you had on the bioload.
Right. When we're talking about cleaning, we're talking about the removal of unwanted matter. And typically the matter that we're trying to remove has some level of cellular activity within it. You know what I mean? And so in most cases, I would say, if we're it's going to be really good at measuring clean, whether it's on a desktop or a floor in a hallway, or obviously there's all kinds of biocontaminants within hospitals and within restaurants, and so with that in mind, it's an effective way of measuring clean in I would say 90% of the circumstances that we have out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was doing the clean audit, I would tell people, in interacting with the built environment in buildings,
right,
you could acquire some pathogenic outcome from touching things or breathing things, right? So we're looking at air and surfaces, if we just boil it down to its simplest. And ultimately, you can't manage what you don't measure. And, cleaning and facility budgets have a tremendous, cleaning is a big part of facility budgets, but we just don't have much measurement. And so, in the ISSA, the International Sanitary Supply Association, established some cleaning levels in their publication, the Commercial Building Cleaning Standard, dated 4/15/15. And in there, they have ATP levels for the hygienometer, the most common one, at below 35 for effective cleaning. Below 70 is the needs improvement category, and above 70 is ineffective cleaning. So with that standard in mind, how can organizations use that information specifically in the current COVID-19 environment to make improvements to their cleaning process?
Well, first of all, they need to employ measurement. I mean, I think it foundationally, that's nice to have targets because it gives us goals But it begins with measurement. I mean, science is about, you can't practice science without measurement. I mean, I think Deming made this really popular. And, I teach actually Six Sigma at Miami University, and we talk about define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And so measurement is a key step in the improvement process. Any kind of process, and cleaning is just a process that we're trying to optimize, that we're trying to improve, right? And so we have to employ measurement in some way, shape, or form. We have to measure, right, so that we know where we're at in terms of effectiveness, and then we can set targets then to where we want to be ultimately. And I think that's what the cleaning standard does, is it gives us some ultimate targets that we want to be below that 35 level, right? And which honestly is achievable. I mean, some people look at those measurements and they go, I can't, there's no way. And if they're measuring, and I'm saying, well, that's what process improvement is all about, is there has to be more effective ways. And I think the other way to use that is that it's about accountability too, because, for example, let's say I hire a new cleaning specialist and they're not executing the right process steps, or they're doing things the way that they're trained, right? Now I can verify that, because if they are executing properly, then they should be meeting the cleaning standards that we've established. And if they are not, then obviously they're not, and we can measure that, right, without babysitting, which is a beautiful thing about measurement in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say, in the absence of any quality metrics, the only real data points we have are cost, maybe some labor hour tracking. So if you don't have a quality standard to put on top of cost, you're always going to underfund and undervalue the process.
Exactly.
It's just predetermined. It's easy to cut something if you don't have a quality standard or a target that you're shooting for. Right. I think you're absolutely right. It's a journey about getting better. And, my passion really is, we aren't going to get there. You can't get to below 35 with dirty rags and dirty mops.
Absolutely.
So, we've got to move from an industry that relies on a stick with string tied to the end of it to real process improvement, to real cleaning outcomes. So,
go ahead. I was going to give you a quick example of what you're exactly talking about there. We took some microfiber cloths into the classroom, and I did this study. I presented it at one of the series symposium. But we basically cleaned the first desk all the way to the 24th desk. And in the last 4 or 5 desks that we cleaned, we actually saw that the ATP levels were going up after we cleaned them. So we're using the exact same rag, same cloth or whatever. And on the last few, we were actually seeing the levels increase. What's that mean? That means we're cross-contamination. We're cross-contaminating these desks. And, those are the kind of things that you can only see with measurement. You can only verify that with measurement. And we're probably doing that all the time, all over America in terms of our cleaning processes, and we don't even know it.
Yeah. Every tool we use has some kind of tolerance, the ability to hold and maintain soil.
Exactly.
And when you exceed that tolerance, then it's just going to shed what you're trying to continue to put in. It's like a basket of apples. Once it gets full, if you keep putting apples on it, the apples just keep rolling off, right? So it's real simple visualizations, but we don't think about that in cleaning. I'm not saying you can't clean with a mop. You just can't clean very far before it gets dirty and gets out of tolerance.
That's exactly right. And you'll see that with ATP. That's what ATP will show you when you start tracking and evaluating your cleaning tools using measurement.
Yeah. If you were evaluating a cleaning process, because one other thing that scares people about ATP and measurements is, how often do I need to do this? Am I running in and swabbing after every worker every day? It could feel like it could be overwhelming. So some practical tips on how to implement a measurement process for improvement that doesn't feel overwhelming.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm looking a lot of times at manufacturing processes. And if you kind of parallel those two activities, right? Quality, the more I'm quality checking something, right? Actually, we teach that it actually decreases the value of a unit or a widget, because if I'm quality checking every step. So we have to be judicious, and we have to be smart in terms of how we employ those quality checks, right? And I think, you know, that's what we want to do is we want to actually do quality checking initially at a high level, optimize the process, but to design the process in such a way that there's inherent quality already into the process. So then we can reduce the amount of times that we actually need to verify and check. Maybe it's when we go to a new building, we need to check more often, but as we are tracking and controlling that, right, we can reduce the amount of testing that we're actually doing. Maybe we're going from a weekly check to a monthly check, right? Or from a weekly check to every you know, 2 weeks we're conducting the checking. So everyone has to develop a process that makes sense, you know, and is cost effective. We don't, you know, I don't advocate for, you know, we can't always do 100% inspection at the manufacturing level, and there's no expectation we would do that at the cleaning level either. So I think it has to make sense within the organization and the structure that is there within that cleaning organization.
Yeah, I always tell people, just get enough data that gives you confidence to make good decisions, right? Whatever that is for you, right? So, you know, I also guard against, you know, having a single data point, running into a restroom, doing one swab, and then saying, hey, you know, this worker's bad, this process is bad, this product is bad. On one data point, maybe. As you get a little more data, then you can make better decisions. But at some point, you'll see those decisions become part of your culture and ingrained in your process, and you'll be able to then back off of the testing, right? So it's a little bit of a bell curve of trying to ramp up so you can ramp down.
Exactly.
You know, another thing that's always been interesting to me, John, is on every disinfectant label, and in COVID, disinfecting has become the thing, right? And hey, it's scary. I'm down with trying to eliminate the virus, or at least the carrier to the virus from surface contamination. But all the labels require a pre-clean or a gross soil removal for the disinfectant to work. And I think in all the conversations, we're kind of underselling this clean before you kill step. Is ATP a good way to kind of interject that pre-clean validation before we move to the disinfecting step, in your opinion?
Absolutely. In fact, when I got introduced to ATP, it was being used at the food processing level. And the way that they were employing that was before they would run through and actually apply and do their sanitization steps, they were in that pre-cleaning process, they had to reduce to certain bioloads prior to going through their sanitation process, because they knew that soil loading would actually negatively impact, right, the sanitization and disinfection. And so absolutely, I think it's actually a part of the intent of ATP is to measure how well we've cleaned a surface, right? Because we know that that loading actually impacts the disinfection. It impacts the sanitization when we have soils, and it can actually negatively, right, have an impact on how many of the bugs or the germs are actually killed in that process. And so using it to measure cleaning prior to sanitization or disinfection, I think is an absolutely critical step.
Yeah, in episode 1 of my series, we talked about the difference between killing and cleaning. You know, we talked about proper mixing, proper application, proper dwell time, but what we didn't really touch on was that proper cleaning beforehand. So I'm glad we kind of closed the loop on that. You know, I really appreciate your time today, John. You know, I know you're an expert on this. Where can people find more about your work, or if they wanted to talk to you about their own processes, you know, how should they contact you? You know, a little more information maybe about how people could use you as a subject matter expert going forward.
Sure. I mean, as you mentioned, I'm a part of the Science Advisory Council with SIRI, and so much of the data and the measurement work that I've done is on their site. So if they go to the SIRI site, it'll be one location. Much of this work was done in conjunction with a company called KIVAC. And so if you go to the KIVAC website, they'll have a bunch of papers and documentations with my name on it in terms of some of the studies and the research done there. So that would be another outlet. So anyways, I would say those would be two specific sites that I would encourage people to go out to.
Yeah, great information on both of those locations. John, I really appreciate it. You have a fantastic day. Stay safe, and talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Alan.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We're out. Look for us next week. Bye now.